Hello there and welcome. This is Primetime News on TV1. Today is the 5th of August 2021. For the Newsfirst team, the voice of the people, I am Jayama Ratnayaka. Let's start off the look at your headlines for tonight. Hospitals on the verge of exceeding capacity as COVID-19 cases spike. Contingency plans to come into effect.
අපගේ රෝහල් මං හිතන්නේ පිරි ඉතිරි යන තත්වයකට පත් වෙන්න ඕන මෙන්න තත්වයක දැනට තියෙන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් පැයකට 3 දෙනෙක් පමණ දල වශයෙන් මේ රෝගයෙන් මිය යනවා.
Supplementary funds worth 11 billion rupees sought to combat COVID-19. 44 teachers granted bail following arrest during demonstrations. Opposition leader obstructed from visiting teachers at harbour entrance. Education Minister outlines plans to amend KNDU bill. Unions demand complete withdrawal of the legislation. Organic fertilizer to be used in paddy cultivation during the Maha season. Quantity to be decided following soil tests. On to your top story for this evening. State Minister Dr. Sudarshani Fernandopulle says COVID-19 patients who do not experience complications and do not fall under the high-risk category will be directed to undergo quarantine at their homes.
The COVID-19 task force conducted a pilot project in the Kalutara district. The President directed the Ministry of Health to prioritize COVID-19 patients since there is a spike in cases. Therefore, the President also said to direct younger patients with less complications to undergo quarantine at their homes and to establish a dedicated call center to monitor their situation and to admit those in the high-risk category. The relevant directives have now been relayed to the Provincial Directors of Health by the Director General of Health Services.
In more related news, health authorities have warned of a spike in the daily number of hospital admissions of COVID-19 patients. Deputy Director General of Health Services Dr. Hemantha Herath said authorities are geared to take further steps, taking into consideration the prevailing situation.
COVID-19 cases in the island have begun increasing rapidly, with an excess of 2,000 COVID-19 cases being detected for the 7th consecutive day yesterday. 2,561 COVID-19 cases were reported yesterday, along with 82 deaths, the highest number of deaths reported in a 24-hour window thus far. Many hospitals island-wide have exceeded the maximum capacity to treat COVID-19 patients. 129 beds have been allocated to treat COVID-19 patients at the Karapitia Hospital. However, according to hospital sources, 220 COVID-19 patients were being treated at the hospital by this morning. While 70 beds have been set aside for COVID-19 patients at the Ratnapura Hospital, sources told Newsfirst that nearly 100 COVID-19 patients are currently being treated at the hospital. The Kandy National Hospital has allocated 54 beds to treat COVID-19 patients, but is currently providing medical care to 156 COVID-19 patients. A spokesperson of the Kandy National Hospital said a portion of another ward has also been utilized to treat COVID-19 patients. All 160 beds allocated for treatment of COVID-19 patients at the Teldenia Hospital are now occupied. Although only 160 beds have been allocated for COVID-19 patients at the Kalubovila Teaching Hospital, 250 COVID-19 patients are being treated at present. The Infectious Diseases Hospital has also exceeded maximum capacity. A spokesperson attached to the IDH said all 200 beds are currently occupied.
We have an emergency plan, a contingency plan. We can set that plan in motion and allocate necessary resources swiftly to contain this situation. We will continue to assign necessary resources throughout the entire hospital network to ensure continuous medical care is provided. If the daily case count rises to 3,500 or 4,000 daily, we will be forced to halt other treatments and treat those COVID-19 patients.
We have observed a higher inflow of patients than which the healthcare system can bear. Patients in need of oxygen are also on the rise. Normal wards are being prepped to treat COVID-19 patients. We would like to make this plea from the people. Please adhere to the health guidelines. The alternative is not to increase the number of hospital or the ICUs.
දැන් තියෙන තත්ත්වය අනුව
This is now a race against the virus and the vaccination drive. Our hospital is almost at full capacity. The deaths confirmed yesterday and the day before are 82 and 74 respectively. Around 3 people are dying of COVID-19 per hour on average. People with complicated illnesses such as diabetes, high blood pressure and heart disease must obtain the vaccine immediately. It will boost your immunity. If an 80-year-old is vaccinated, his immunity will be as strong as a 50-year-old. Obtain the vaccine without delay. Until immunity is built up, protect yourself for a few months.
ප්‍රවේශම් වෙලා මේ කාලේ මාස කිහිපයක් ගත කරන්න කියලා තමයි අපගේ පණිවිඩය.
Meanwhile, COVID-19 vaccines were administered at several locations today. The first dose of the Sinopharm jab was administered to people above the age of 60 at the Vihara Mahadevi Park. 1,000 people above the age of 60 received the jab today. The first dose of the Sinopharm jab for people above the age of 60 was also administered at the Kalubovila Hospital. Sinopharm and AstraZeneca jabs were administered at the Public Health Inspector's office in Katana. A tense situation arose at the location after the Public Health Inspector office ran out of Sinopharm jabs at 10 a.m.
වෙලා තියෙන 1600කට විදිනවා කියලා 300කට බෙහෙත් ගෙනල්ලා.
රුපියල් 5000කුත් ආයතනෙන් කපාගෙන අපි මේ ඒ කියන්නේ මේ බෙහෙත් එක විඳ ගන්න එපා. බෙහෙත් එක විඳ ගන්න හින්දා. අnder කහේ ඉඳන් ඉන්නේ. ඉතින් මාර වෙනකොට බෙහෙත් නැහැ.
10,616,683 people had received the first dose of COVID-19 vaccines by yesterday. 2,646,042 people had received both doses.
If
the people are not obtaining vaccines, we are considering making that vaccination card a mandatory document that would have to be carried by a person at all times. Based on the advice of the President, the government has instructed divisional secretaries and Gramanildaris to inquire into those who have not obtained the jabs and to provide it to them at the earliest. Meanwhile, a supplementary estimate of 11.8 billion rupees to support COVID-19 prevention efforts was tabled in Parliament today. The proposal was submitted seeking funds for the State Ministry of Primary Healthcare, Epidemics and COVID-19 Disease Control. Meanwhile, Health Minister Pavitra Vaniarachi responded to the questions raised by opposition leader Sajith Premadasa in Parliament recently on the COVID-19 situation.
The number of COVID-19 cases detected daily stands at a high rate of about 2,000 or 2,500. 86% of the people above 30 years have been given the first dose of the vaccines. Plans have been made to administer at least one dose of the jab to all those above the age of 30. Since the severity of the pandemic keeps fluctuating, we cannot comment definitely on the stance of a new wave. The number of COVID-19 patients under medical care that stood at 23,804 on the 23rd of July had risen to 30,017 by the 1st of August. However, healthcare personnel have been able to limit the number of patients receiving treatment at ICU facilities to between 140 and 150 during the last 10 days. 2 entities in the country are producing nearly 77 tons of oxygen. 44 tons are being given to hospitals for medical purposes, while the rest is being distributed to factories. Cabinet approval has already been obtained to take the measures required to meet any rise in demand for oxygen. Accordingly, the relevant procurement has been made in this regard. 19,688 children below the age of 10 have contracted COVID-19. 26,043 children between the ages of 10 and 18 have been infected. 14 children below the age of 18 have died due to the virus.
143ක් වයස අවුරුදු 18ට අඩු දරුවන් 14 දෙනෙක් මේ වන විට මිය ගොස් ඇත. මම හිතන්නේ අපි කරුණ ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න.
I believe that you had visited the Ragama hospital as well after we brought this matter to your attention. I thank you for that. I wish to draw your attention to the Kalubovila hospital as well. Beds have been set up outdoors. That has been reported. Inquire into that as well. At the same time, an emergency situation has been declared at the Ratnapura Hospital, Gaul and Karapitiya hospitals. I wish to request you to prepare a work plan that will allow the people to gain a clear understanding of the situation.
පවතින සත්‍ය තත්ත්වය පිළිබඳව රටේ ජනතාවට දැනගන්නට වැඩපිළිවෙලක් සකස් කරන්න මේ එන්නත ඔක්සිජන් ලබා ගන්න ඕක
Obtain the required oxygen supplies and vaccines. Don't follow the ordinary procurement process. It can be done in an emergency. Purchase them from whatever it is available. The Parliament can approve them afterwards. Bring down the supplies. As long as the task force is there, we will have to just sit and wait. People are dying. What is required isn't happening. The cabinet must take this into its hands and appoint a committee. We will support this.
මේ කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලය මේක අරගෙන විශේෂයෙන්ම කොමිටියක් පත් කරන්න. අපි ඔක්කොම උදව් කරන්න. ඒ මුලින්ම වැරදි අදහස්.
That is a wrong conception. It was President Gotabaya Rajapaksa who provided leadership for the presidential task force since the outbreak of the pandemic. He was involved in it directly and contributed a great deal to it. The relevant cabinet ministers were present during its meetings in which decisions were made. A special discussion was held at the Finance Ministry this morning as well on the Delta variant. We decided to set up facilities that will allow expectant mothers to work from home. An agreement was also reached on appointing an official each to all state institutions to overlook the implementation of health regulations. The highest number of infections are being reported from those who attended weddings and those who removed their face masks while having meals together. The spread of the Delta variant through protests that are being staged by teachers has resulted in a high demand for oxygen and more deaths in hospitals. Therefore, we are requesting all teachers to bear the current situation in mind and to halt their struggle at least temporarily on humanitarian grounds.
මනුෂ්‍යත්වයට මුල් තැන දීලා මානුෂීය පදනමින් ඔබලාගේ මේ අරගලය తాවකාලිකව හෝ නවත්තන්න. මේ ඔක්කොම කරන්න ඉඩ
While allowing all these activities to take place when patients don't have sufficient oxygen and when private hospitals have also reached full capacity, they keep claiming that they have done it the best. When we asked them to import vaccines, they promoted a tonic. They poured pots of water into rivers, but they speak as if we consumed the tonic and they gave us vaccines.
හරියට හැබැයි දැන් අපට කියන්න එන්නේ කොහොමද දන්නවද? අපි නිකන් පැණි බීලා ඒගොල්ලෝ අපිට ගෙනත් දුන්නා වගේ.
මේක ව්‍යසනයක් බවට පත් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
This situation has become disastrous. Around 75 or 80 people are dying daily. Regardless of how the government boasts about administering vaccines, they did not have a plan to import the vaccines on time. There is no point in administering the vaccines now. They did not make timely decisions. If you had closed down the country for a couple of weeks in mid-April when it was required the most, the country wouldn't have to face this disastrous situation. The Delta COVID-19 variant is spreading as a result of the government's failure. The virus is spreading through buses and trains that are crowded. The country is open now, but they are trying to pin the blame on teachers who are staging protests. They are trying to create the impression of a teachers' cluster. This is not a teachers' cluster. Even Mahindananda Alutgamage has tested positive. Veerawansa is in quarantine. It is said that Gammanpilla has also tested positive. Ministers are testing positive for the virus. Is it because of these protests? Did they contract the virus from these protests? This is the government cluster.
ආණ්ඩුවේ ඇමතිවරුන්ට පොසිටු උද්ඝෝෂණ ඉඳද දැන් මේක උද්ඝෝෂණ වලට ගිහිල්ලාද හැදුනේ මේ ආණ්ඩුවේ පොකුර ඒ රෝහල් අඩපණ වීම මත.
If the breakdown in the healthcare system leads to a spike in deaths and figures, the opposition must bear the responsibility for that. There are alternative methods to stage protests. For example, teachers can withdraw from online education or refrain from teaching when schools reopen. They shouldn't protest on the streets. We saw that police officers are being injured due to the conduct of university students near the parliament. Is this how they must act? Intellectuals must act more intelligently.
උගතුන් හැටියට කටයුතු කරන පිරිස් මීට වැඩිය බුද්ධිමත්ව කටයුතු කර යුතුයි කියලා අපි යෝජනා කරනවා.
The trade union action launched by supplementary health staff, nurses and other workers attached to the health sector was called off earlier today. The trade union action had been launched to ensure authorities do not disregard the requirements of healthcare workers. Their demands included continuing the special COVID-19 leave granted for health staff, provision of COVID-19 related bonuses, implementing the cabinet decision on converting the medical service into a closed one, removal of maximum overtime limits. Patients who arrived at the National Hospital in Colombo to seek medical attention were burdened as a result of the trade union action.
ඇත්තටම මිනිසුන්ට රැකිරස්සාවල් නැතුව ජීවත් වෙන්න විදියක් නැතුව ඉන්න මේ අවස්ථාවේ මේගොල්ලෝ මේ විදියට කරපුවාම කොහොමද මේ රටක් ගෙනියන්නේ මේ අහිංසක ලෙඩුනේ මෙතන ඉන්නේ.
Our cameras captured monitored the situation at the Colombo South Teaching Hospital in Kalubovila. Healthcare workers attached to the National Eye Hospital also supported the trade union action. Daily operations at multiple hospitals across the country were also hampered due to the trade union action. According to our correspondent, junior staff members of the Anuradhapura Teaching Hospital had stepped away from their duty action that began at 7 a.m. We wish to apologize to the people if they faced any inconvenience during the last few hours. We also request them to bear some patience for the future of the health sector. Services relating to the treatment of COVID-19 and emergency units were in operation. Only a small group of healthcare personnel staged this trade union. Therefore, only some services may have been stalled for a few hours. The 4th Magistrates Court has granted bail to 44 teachers who were arrested after a protest yesterday.
The teachers were produced before 4th Magistrate Priyanthaliyanage by the Colombo Harbour Police. We inquired as to where they were taking us. The driver said he does not know that. They took us to the harbour police station, which had fewer people. It was not an ordinary environment. It is an environment that is built for them.
I was hanging on to the handle of his bike. My trouser was torn at that time. It was said that they were from the CCD. They pushed me into the van. The marks on the shirt are from iron rods in the vehicle.
They tried to reintroduce the white van culture to the country. We wish to tell the government that they should not do it. They are dealing with 260,000 teachers and principals.
They tried to remand the teachers under the charges of violating quarantine regulations. The magistrate rejected the request made by the Attorney General on this. The court determined that there was no basis for the facts presented by the police. Therefore, the suspects were ordered to be released on bail. They requested PCR tests to be conducted on them. The court ordered that a person's freedom cannot be restricted by remanding them and rejected the request to conduct PCR tests.
We wish to reiterate that we will continue our struggle until we win our demands.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa attempted to visit protesters from teachers and principals unions who have been detained at the Colombo Harbour police station. The protesters had been arrested during demonstrations in Colombo yesterday. However, the opposition leader was denied entry at the entry gate of the Colombo Harbour.
ඉතින් ඔබතුමාලා කියන ගස්තාව උල්ලංඝනය කිරීමක් විතර ඔබතුමාලා මාරු වෙන්න එපා. මේ පොඩ කතා කරලා අපිට පොලිසියට නම් යන්නේ ඔබතුමාලා අවසර දෙන්න කියලා එතුමා කියනවා එතනින් එහා කාගෙන්වත් අහන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. මෙතන ඉන්න ප්‍රධාන නිලධාරියා කියන්නේ මේ. රටේ පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීගෙන්ට විපක්ෂ නායකවරුන්ට අපිට ඕනලා කියන්න බලයි දිලා ඔබතුමාලා මේක ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න. ඔබතුමාලා තමයි මේ මිනිස්සුන්ගේ මානව හිතේ කඩ කරලා තින්නේ මේ වරායතුනේ දාගෙන. ඒක පොලිසියත් නීති විරෝධී රඳවා තමයි. රඳවා බැගීමක්. ඔබතුමාලා මෙහාට බෝල පාස් කරනවා ඒක නිලධාරී නීතිය දුන්නා. ඒගොල්ලෝ දැන් ඔබතුමාලා දෙනවද නැද්ද කියන්නේ? මට තීරණයක් දෙන්න බෑ. ඒක කාද තීරණ දෙන්න ඔබතුමාලා ඉතින් ඔබතුමාලා කතා කරලා කියන්නේ මේ පොළොව අතන මේ ඉන්නේ මේ විපක්ෂ නායකවරු.
ඒක අරුබුද ඇති කරගන්න කිසිම හේතුවක් නැහැ. මට අයිතියක් තියෙනවා. විපක්ෂ නායකවරයා හැටියට පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීවරයා හැටියට මේ ගුරුතුමන්ලා ගුරුතුමියන්ලා විදුහල්පතිතුමන්ලා ගිහලා බලන්න. මට සිද්ධ වෙනවා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ මේක මතු කරන්න. මම කැමති නැහැ ඒක කරන්න. මොකද ඒකෙන් හානිය සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ මේ තමුන්නාන්සලා. ඒකට කරුණාකරලා මම ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා ඉහළ නිලධාරීතුමාට කතා කරලා දැන් මට මේ නිත්‍යානුකූලව මගේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී අයිතිය පොඩක් ඒකට අවස්ථාව ලබා දෙන්න. දැන් පොඩක් කෝල් එකක් තියලා පොලිස් ප්‍රකාශනය මම ගත්තා සීනියර් DI දෙන්න ෆෝන් එක ගත්තා ෆෝන් එක ආන්සර් කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඔබතුමාලා විසඳුම් කතා කරන්නේ. අපිට කෑකෝ ගහගන්න ප්‍රශ්න ඇති කරගන්න කිසිම හේතුවක් නැහැ. හරි විහිළුවක් නෙමෙයි. රටේ විපක්ෂ නායකවරයාට හම්බෙන්න බැරි.
වරාය අධිකාරීව නීත්‍යානුකූල අවසරයක් අරගෙන ඉන්නේ.
දැන් ඒක අවශ්‍ය නැහැ කියලා වරාය අධිකාරිය කියනවනේ.
හැබැයි මේ පොරේඩේ ඔබතුමා දෙන්න ඕනේ.
අහලා කියන්නේ
ඒක තමයි එහෙම
ඇති කරගන්න දෙයක් නැහැ සර් අපි මේවා කරලා
The opposition leader raised this matter as a point of order in parliament today.
වරාය අධිකාරී නිලධාරීන්ට ඒ පොලිසිය
Can the officials of the Ports Authority and the Harbour Police disrupt us? I would like to remind you of the rule of law in this country. This is not a lawless land. There is a rule of law in this land.
රූල් ඔෆ් ජංගල් ලෝ එක නෙමෙයි. ඉතින් මම ගරු කතානායකතුමාට බොහොම ඕනෑකමින් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න කැමති.
I would like to earnestly ask the Honourable Speaker, in the process of administering justice and based on the rule of law, how can they disrupt me as the opposition leader and a member of parliament and also parliamentarian Nalin Bandara? They have no right to do so. We went there to look into the well-being of those teachers and to assess legal aid available for them.
තුබ සාධනයේ දිහා බලන්න. අපි අදාළ නිලධාරීන් දන්නවා. නීති ආධාර දිහා බලන්න. අදාළ නිලධාරීන්ගේ සොයලා බලන්න. මම ඔබතුමාගෙන්
You need to make a statement to confirm that those officials made a mistake. I need a decision from you.
සොයලා බලන්න ඒ කියන්නේ.
වරාය අධිකාරිය ඇතුල් වෙනකොට ආයතන 3කින් අවසරය ලබා ගන්න ඕන. වරාය
Permission from 3 institutions must be obtained before entering the Ports Authority. Those institutions are the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, Sri Lanka Navy and the Sri Lanka Customs. Only when those 3 institutions grant approval, an individual can enter the police station which is housed within the SLPA. If you had called me, the subject minister, it would have been best. There is a certain norm. Entering parliament is a basic right of each parliamentarian. Mahinda Rajapaksa, the current prime minister who is the former president, was denied entry to parliament when he arrived on a bicycle as a member of parliament to oppose the hike in the prices of fuel. Those who did not even allow that are the ones who are voicing their concerns over not being able to enter the port. These protests are being conducted island-wide. COVID-19 is spreading everywhere today. I had my reservations on your tour to the port. I thought you were going there to spread COVID-19 and to halt the operations of the port.
ඒක ඇතුළේ කොරෝනා හදන්නද කියලා. මුළු වරායේ ආනයනය අපනයනය නැති කරන්නද වරායට එන්න කියන එක.
හරි.
විශ්වාසයක් නැහැ. මෙතුමා මුලින්ම කිව්වා කාටවත් වැක්සින් මුළු රටම ගහලි උරනාම තමයි කිව්වා.
What he said back then was he will not obtain the vaccine until all citizens in the country are vaccinated. But his doctors have claimed that he is weak. Honourable Speaker, officials of the Ports Authority have only conducted their duties at that instance.
එතුමා සඳහන් කරා වැක්සීන් එක ගත්ත එක ගැන. මට කොරෝනා වැළඳුණයින් පස්සේ
My doctors warned if I do not obtain the vaccine, they cannot be responsible for my health. I am proud to have obtained the vaccine through the standard procedure by waiting in line.
මං ගැන වගකීමක් බාර ගන්න බැරිය කියලා. හැබැයි මම ආඩම්බර වෙනවා විශාල ප්‍රමාණයකට වැක්සින් ලබා දුන්නයින් පසුව අපි පෝලිම් පයින් නැතුව ගිහිල්ලා තමයි වැක්සින් එක ලබා ගත්තේ.
Meanwhile, the protest march launched by the national movement against the salary anomalies of teachers and principals entered its second day today. The march began from Mavanella town. Instead of providing solutions, the government is engaging in acts of suppression. Therefore, we wish to tell the government that if they are seeking solutions through suppression, then teachers and principals are ready to face that. Meanwhile, Namal Kumara had opposed the demonstration in the Mipiti area in Kegol as the protest march moved along the Colombo Kandy main road.
ඒක ඔයා ගමවත් දන්නේ නැති මිනිහෙක් නේද මෙතන ඇවිල්ලා ඉන්නේ. මේ නිකම් මුළු වැරදි මත දෙන්නේ නැතුව ගුරුවරු අවතාරයට පත් කරන්නේ නැතුව කරුණා කරලා මෙතනින් නැගිටලා යන්න මෙච්චර වැදගත් විදියට ඔබතුමාට කියලා ලැබිලා තියෙනවා මේ වැඩේට. ඉතින් වැදගත් විදියට ආවන වැදගත් විදියට යන්න ඕන වැඩේ. වට කරලා ඕම ගහන්න කරන්නේ. නේ ගහන්න. කිසිම දෙයක් නැහැ. මගේ විරෝධතාවය මම ගෙනියනවා. ඒක පාඩම් නවත්තන්න බෑ. ගැම්මක් නැතුව හිටියේ දැන් ගැම්මක් තියෙනවා.
This was the situation that arose when the protesters passed through the location in which Namal Kumara was staging his demonstration.
ප්‍රචාරක රටයයි ඔබ දක්වන්නා වූ සහයෝගයට समस्त जनताओगे समस्त लंकावासी गरुगरियंगे आचार्य देवतावेदी सुदकर सिंहवा आदरणीय अन्यताप्ते कोण असलेला कोण पसनाला අපිට කනගාටුවක් කියයි
The protesters ended their march at Nidahas Mawatha in Kegol today and will resume their demonstration in Galigamo tomorrow. Meanwhile, protests were held in several locations against the proposed KNDU bill. A demonstration organized by the Samagi Jana Balawegaya was held at Town Hall, Colombo today. The protest, which lasted for about an hour, was attended by the opposition leader Sajith Premadasa.
අපි ආරම්භ කරපු නිදහස් අධ්‍යාපනයේ සුරකීමේ සටනේ ජයග්‍රාහී අවස්ථා.
We have achieved certain victories in our struggle to protect free education. However, this victory is incomplete. This victory will be established once the KDU bill is withdrawn and when free education is protected while improving the quality of education for the defence sector under the Kotalavala Defence University. We are happy to know that the debate scheduled for tomorrow has been cancelled by the government. They have cancelled it twice. This is a good sign.
දවසේ පවත්වන්නට යෙදුණු ඒ විවාදයක් මේ රජය හකුලාගෙන තිබෙනවා. දැන් දෙපාරක්ම මේක හකුලා ගත්තා. ඒක හොඳ ලක්ෂණයක්.
කොතලාවල ආරක්ෂක විද්‍යාපීඨය
We do not oppose the Kotalavala Defence University. That should be developed and brought to international standards. Since there are students who are admitted privately, the KDU must be brought under the purview of the University Grants Commission.
විද්‍යාල කොමිෂන් සභාව පනත යටතට ගේන්න ඕනේ කියලා. එක පැත්තකින් මිලිටරි කරණය.
We will fight to defeat this effort to militarize, politicize and commercialize the KDU in different ways.
ක්‍රියාවලිය පරාජය කිරීමට අපි කැප වෙනවා. අනිත් පැත්තෙන් මේක විශ්වවිද්‍යාල
They are trying to bring in a bill that will change an entire university system. If this is allowed to happen, many universities will emerge like grocery shops.
කිසිම ප්‍රමිතියක් කිසිම නියාමනයක් නැතුව
The People's Movement Against the Militarization of Education organized a protest at the Lipton roundabout in Colombo today. 64 unions representing students and university lecturers participated in the protest. We don't need amendments or votes for this bill. We will continue this struggle unconditionally until the KDU bill is withdrawn. Protests were also held in Ambalantota, Batiklo and Hatton today. As Minister Chamal Rajapaksa mentioned yesterday, a decision will be taken after everything, including the amendments, are taken into consideration after tomorrow. We need time to consider them. According to the Minister, further course of action will be taken after that.
In more headline-making news, Chief Advisor to the President Lalit Weeratunga iterated today that the government's policy on the use of organic fertilizer has not been reversed. He made the following remarks while attending a media briefing at the Presidential Media Centre.
No changes have been made to the Vistas of Prosperity policy statement presented by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Why have reports surfaced on the government allowing the importation of chemical fertilizer?
Even in the process of using organic fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium are required. Those nutrients are also imported under the same HS code. When it is banned, we cannot import essential nutrients either. Normally, anyone can import it, but through this Import and Export Gazette, a license system will be introduced to import those. At first, we had banned it. Now it has been converted to a licensed item. Who issues those licenses? It is issued by agriculture officials. A recommendation from the Ministry of Agriculture and Fertilizer Secretariat are required to obtain the license. Most of these items have been compiled and issued an HS code that is done internationally. We cannot make separate HS codes. What we have done is the banned items will be allowed to be imported based on a license basis.
How will organic fertilizer be used in the Maha season?
Cultivation of paddy will first commence in Ampara, then in Batiklo, Polonnaruwa and Anuradhapura. The season will commence after the 15th of September. We have drawn up plans to ensure farmers receive stocks of fertilizer before the farming season begins. This will commence from Ampara in around 10 days. There are tests, we cannot deny it. If the fertilizer agreed with the soil in Ampara, Batiklo, Polonnaruwa and Anuradhapura, 80% of it will be successful. Then we only have a small portion on the other side. Soil tests in Ampara will begin next week because the current season must end. Based on that, the distribution of fertilizer will be conducted.
State Minister of Money and Capital Market Ajit Niwad Cabral commented on the international sovereign bond repayments of Sri Lanka in Parliament today.
We got to shrink the amount of exposure that Sri Lanka has to have for its international sovereign bonds, and we have taken a conscious decision that we would settle these international sovereign bonds with other inflows that come from other sources so that the equilibrium of our economy will be thus maintained. So what we have seen and what we envisage doing is that by 2021, by the end of this year, the ISB's outstanding will be just $13 billion, down from $15 billion, and on a GDP which would be around 83 billion, the percentage would come down to 15.6%. Next year it would shrink further. That means by 2022 it would be around 13% because we would be repaying a further $1.5 billion. Now this $1.5 billion next year, Honourable Deputy Chairman, we would be ensuring that we have other inflows that would take care of this repayment so that we don't burden our economy with further debt, particularly high interest rate debt that the previous government had incurred in the process. Our Finance Minister, Honorable Basil Rajapaksa, is spearheading a committee which is looking into all the difficulties that investors are presently undergoing to ensure that those are facilitated so that they would be able to enjoy a freedom to invest freely without having to be constrained by various difficulties that they have hitherto been subjected to. So we invite investors to come in.
A requiem service was held in memory of the late chairman of the Capital Maharaja Group, Mr. R. Raj Mahendran, at the St. Anthony's Catholic Church in Kolpiti today. The service was conducted by His Lordship the Auxiliary Bishop of Colombo, J.D. Anthony, and Parish Priest of St. Anthony's Church, Kolpiti, Father Julian Patrick.
It is my pleasure.
And with the sound of the trumpet of God,
may they continue to grow as a thoughtful and caring people that He knew to be
Mr. Raja Mahendran, a successful businessman, media giant, philanthropist, social activist, and so on and so forth. This list does not exhaust who he was. But most of all, what is to be admired is how he touched the hearts of the rural communities with his Come at the project, the outpouring of his love and compassion to the poor and the marginalized. A humble service done in silence and hiddenness, not coming to the limelight.
And with that, it's a wrap of Primetime News on TV1. For the Newsfirst team, the voice of the people, I've been Jamal Ratnayaka, along with our sign language interpreter for tonight, Taraka Gabriel. Do take care, stay safe, and have yourself a good night.